My name is Trevor Blackford. I'm a senior product manager with Redpanda, and today I'm going to talk to you about disaster recovery through our newest feature, shadowing. Let's dive in, shall we? Highly available architectures can still fail. Outages in the cloud are not limited to availability zones, but can affect entire regions. In 2025, every major cloud provider has had at least one regional outage lasting several hours. Addressing this risk for mission-critical applications requires a multi-region approach to the disaster recovery. Our newest feature enables just that. I'm pleased to introduce shadowing, the ability to link different Redpanda clusters together. With this release, we are focused on disaster recovery. This solution is an active passive design through asynchronous replication. Shadowing links a destination, or shadow cluster, to a source cluster. You define the nature of that link, specifying what topics should be replicated from the source cluster to the shadow cluster. The shadow cluster gets updates from the source brokers automatically via the Kafka API, resulting in a very low replication lag. Topics, schemas, and ACLs linked on the shadow cluster are in read-only mode, preventing from accidental modifications that would put the shadow cluster out of sync with the source cluster. All of this allows shadowing to achieve a very low recovery point objective, which means in the event of a catastrophe, taking the source cluster offline, there is very little data loss. I'll be using the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to provide an example of why disaster recovery is so important. Imagine your cluster has been working on an extremely difficult problem, like figuring out the exact question to the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. If, say, a Vogon fleet came and destroyed the cluster's region to make a way for a bypass, you'd lose everything. And you'd have to get a new custom planet built unless your data had been copied to a safe place. With shadowing, you would simply fail over the topics and redirect your producers to the shadow cluster, which would be accepting writes. We are expecting to release this shortly with support for self-hosted environments and in our cloud. We've worked very hard to make setting up shadowing as easy as possible. In just 3 steps, you can replicate your most important workloads in a separate cluster. The first step is to have a target cluster. You can just copy your existing deployment mechanism and spin up a duplicate, or you could size your spare cluster according to the workload you plan on replicating. Step 2 is creating the shadow link. This can be done via RPK, console, or the API. The shadow link configuration includes the source cluster details and specifies the topics, ACLs, and consumer groups for replication. Step 3 is handled by the shadow cluster. You only need to sit back and watch the magic. Now, let's move to a demonstration on how to create a shadow link using our console. I have here a source cluster that is generating potential questions to match the answer of life, the universe, and everything, which everybody already knows from deep thought is 42. The pan-dimensional beings eagerly watching this process have smartly concluded that such an important workload cannot risk regional outage. I need a disaster recovery cluster that uses shadowing to replicate the topics on the source cluster. I will be spinning that up very quickly using a Docker Compose. And here we see that the shadow cluster is already activated, but it's in a blank state. Here we have the console. I have 2 tabs open for console instances to my 2 clusters. The leftmost one is for the source cluster, which has my very important workload. You can see the topics, and you can see the data. Here is the cluster I just created. It has no topics and it has no data. From the left-hand side, I will navigate to the shadow links and I'll create a shadow link. I can specify the name for a shadow link, and I need to provide the details for my source cluster. You can specify one or many Kafka brokers here. You can also supply Scram credentials and TLS configurations. Next is topic selection. You can either include all the topics or list a subset, either through specific topic names, matching a prefix, or even exclude specific topics. I'm just going to be selecting all topics to replicate, including ones that haven't even been created. ACL synchronization is important here. You want to make sure that the users have appropriate access to your shadow cluster if it becomes necessary. If you add a filter, that will restrict the ACLs. Otherwise, all of them will sync. You can also sync your consumer groups, so downstream applications are less impacted by failover events. Now, the shadow cluster will start replicating according to the shadow link configuration. On the overview page, you can see that this is a shadow cluster linked to a primary cluster with the address. You can also see the number of topics that are being replicated. Once they are created, all of the data will sync automatically. If I go into question attempts, where data is constantly being generated, we can watch it being copied in real time as it goes from the source cluster to the shadow cluster. This topic is in shadow mode, which means you cannot write to it. If you attempt, you will encounter an error telling you that you don't have the appropriate permissions. Now, let's go back to the source cluster. And let's say there's a sudden epiphany that all of a sudden, you know the ultimate question. And so you're going to create a new topic, and you're going to add very important data to that topic. Once you produce here, that topic and that data will be synchronized to the shadow cluster. Here we see question, the new topic I created, along with the message that I put in. Now let's imagine that worse comes to worse, that the source cluster gets obliterated. We will need to fail over the shadow cluster, which can be done with a simple button. If you want to promote all topics, you can simply click that button, or you can go into the shadow link more explicitly and select which topics you want to fail over. I want to fail over all topics, so I will. Now that I've done that, I can add my own records because the write restrictions have been lifted since this has been failed over and is no longer, strictly speaking, a shadow topic. Thanks for watching this demo. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you never have to listen to a Vogon reciting poetry. To learn more, please reach out through any of the methods listed here.